Hello and welcome to another episode of Gotham Sound TV. I am Peter Schneider and I'm here with Loren Sherman. Hi, Loren. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Peter. How are you?
I'm all right. Well, we are live, so please ask your questions. I can see them right in front of me. I've moved it closer because my eyes are not what they used to be, but today we're talking about frequency coordination. Loren and I did a video year or two ago that the link will be put in the description. I think it was 2 years ago. And so this is going to be an update. We're going to update some of the topics. You'll also find this video and the previous video at the Wireless Microphone Spectrum Alliance website, WMSA, where we'll have a link in the description as well. Please ask your questions. So just for people that haven't seen the first video, let's bring everybody up to speed. Loren, you are Director of Frequency Coordination for CP Communications. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
That is correct. I've been with CP for going on 14 years. More and more, thanks to Michael Mason from CP Communications, one of the owners. He's definitely given me plenty of rope to make something of our frequency coordination program. On top of all the in-house work that we do a lot of large sporting event frequency coordinations. Quick shout out to my team from CP, Avi Sakal and John Moretto, who work with me on low power coordination. And of course, Henry Cohen, who's our Director of Spectrum Affairs, who works on everything, including our stuff in 450, 455, and above a gig.
And we've just put a link in for CP Comms, and shout out to Henry from me as well, also on the e-board of WMSA. And before CP, you started as an E&G sound person, if I remember. Is that right?
Back in the early mid 90s, through the early 2000s, I did a bunch of ENG, did news magazine shows, based local here in Detroit, but traveled a bit, not a lot. And right around 2000, the two-man crew was starting to shrink a little bit, and I had an opportunity to start doing more sports. I was doing some sports, so I started A2ing more locally instead of just kind of mixing and matching. And eventually, in the early 2000s, I started doing Monday Night Football on ABC, and I've stayed in the NFL. I think I just finished my 23rd year of working NFL events.
Wow.
And so that is traveling on one of the weekly shows and also interfacing regularly with their frequency coordinators, helping where I can, making sure that the shows that we represent and where we rent gear to those companies, that their frequency coordination is everything that they need in order to do their weekly shows. And that's really where we started to build the frequency coordination, something that Michael started in the early days of renting the gear to the networks, to the very early days of frequency coordination starting in for football games. And we just kind of built on that, and it's kind of built into something that's quite nice. I actually like what I do.
It's
something
awesome.
that I'm finding many people my age don't.
Congratulations. No, that's very cool. You've touched on a little bit of what I was going to ask, but if in a nutshell, what is frequency coordination and why is it necessary?
I mean, frequency coordination can be something as simple that we do. We will send out what we call suggested frequencies with every package that leaves our shop. When we started doing that, we had a lot of stuff that was in smaller bands, and you had to make sure you weren't going to send a piece of gear to Houston that wasn't going to work in Houston. Mm-hmm. So we would offer up. It doesn't mean that it's not taking into account all the frequencies that might be in the venue or who might show up at the venue. But in that market with DTV, this will work. So it can be something as simple as that and something as more complex as Henry and I are going in with 4 other guys to do the Kentucky Derby this year because they've never had a solid frequency coordination. They've done a frequency registry program where you would register your frequencies, and they would try to keep people away from each other by registration. Now we're taking it a step further where we're going to be doing a full coordination where we will have people to put out the fires that might arise, working with the broadcasters, and there are several that do that event. There's the national, we all know NBC's the national broadcaster of the Kentucky Derby, but there's other smaller shows that take place on the site. There's morning shows from every local affiliate that is there. So that's the grand size of frequency coordination, where we're going to have RF cameras, we're going to have microphones, we're going to have everybody wanting to do some kind of video transmission in Wi-Fi, which could potentially be a problem. It's anything that has a frequency without a wire in between the transmitter and receiver. If you have that setup, it needs to be frequency coordinated, no matter what band it's in.
And I see comments already coming in from the unmarketing group, which we will get to. Just note it and keep them coming. And it sounds to me, Loren, like there's 2 aspects to it almost. One is, as you say, suggested frequencies, and people can do that on their own. I want to give a shout out to Soundbase. Even the free version, you can do research about cities that you aren't in to understand, what the spectrum is like there. And then it sounds like when you mentioned there's 4 of you going to the Kentucky Derby, there's another 6. Sorry, there's another element to frequency coordination too, which sounds a little bit more like, here's the suggested frequency, and by the way, we're going to confirm that you're on there.
Well, it's no longer suggested. It is
Right.
your frequency. It's your coordination. It becomes the policing portion of the program. So you have to monitor. To coordinate is one piece of it, is to have everybody, here's your frequencies. Now you have to police that. You have to make sure everybody gets tested and tagged, so you know that they're where they're supposed to be. And then having guys roaming the field, whatever event it is, to make sure that there isn't somebody that, look, how much of this gear fits into a backpack? And on a lot of events, we get a lot of people that don't speak English, don't read English, and therefore we can have a lot of signage. They may not know what the rules are.
I just want to jump in. You're not making a political statement. You're literally dealing with international crews from all over the world.
We're dealing with, so one of my favorite stories, to make it not a political statement, we were doing a baseball all-star game in San Diego, and a crew came in. They were from a Hispanic station, and I think they were primarily web-based. I don't really recall. And we used all the tools that we had. So at the end of the night was when they were discovered, because they were not a frequency that was used at the Home Run Derby, but it was going to be used the next day for the broadcast of the event. So we were notified by the A2. He had someone on his frequency. We tuned to it. We listened to it. One of the coordinators that I worked with, shout out to Enrique Gonzalez for being my guy who can help me translate. And Enrique was able to translate enough when we were able to demod the signal that we got where they were from. One of the other guys hit social media, found a picture that they posted of where they were located, and we were able to find them through, it's not just, I have a scanner, I have an analyzer, you're going to use a computer, you're going to use a phone, you're going to use everything at your disposal. And we ended up catching up with them the next day, and we did that because this was MLB. They turned off their credential for us. So when they came in, their credential scanned red. They had to go to credentialing. They were then led to us, where we could just solve their problem very nicely. Nothing, it wasn't anything about anything. They came in, all of their equipment was in a backpack, and we have to be better we now at most of our setups we have multiple languages of signs about frequency coordination. You have to
Yes,
if you want them to coordinate.
absolutely. And I think I have a story similar, being on the team, the NATO coordination team. Shout out to Tom Jones, who we he demodulated the audio, heard I think it was German, and figured out it was the German delegation social media team that was. They had just snuck by. And I think, if there's one summary of our last video I would definitely want to put out there, it's if you are on the ENG team of these large events, just assume that there's a coordinator. Assume that the packet of information that was sent to somebody at your station or at your organization did not make it to you or your technical team. And please take it upon yourself to find the frequency coordination team. I've had such a good experience. When you find somebody and they come to the desk, they're happy to get a frequency. They're happy to play along. It's when they don't know that you're there and you have to chase them down, and then they're on the air and now you have to kind of hover around them to change the frequency. That nobody likes that. Jared is testing. Thank you. I see the comments from LinkedIn. So, by the way, we're also going on LinkedIn. So please ask your comments there and questions. I have a question from Alex Pinkleton. I'm sorry, I can't read the strangest font on my comment board. Any best case tools when coordination extends across teams, video and audio, to wrangle all together, or coordinating each team separately with bespoke tools for each system is the standard? So I guess let's get into some of the deep nerd stuff. So everybody watching, strap yourself in. What are some of the tools that you use that would also be applicable to just people that are frequency coordinating events themselves?
Well, I don't think you should have an analyzer. And it's at every different price point now.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do any kind of frequency coordination, you've got to have an analyzer.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a very cheap one, but you got to have something.
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody complains of interference, you have to be able to go see if there's interference. If you don't have an analyzer, you cannot do that.
Right. And there's some, obviously you can spend 20, 30 grand on one, but there's also, you can spend a couple of $100.
You can, for $200, you can go on Amazon and buy a tiny essay.
Mm-hmm.
And if using it properly, it will assist you. It's not going to do everything that you might need to do. It's a tool. There's lots of tools. I will always have a big analyzer with me at an event, and I might have 2 or 3 different kinds of analyzers. But in my pocket, I carry a tiny essay, because then if I'm just going to dinner and somebody stops me on the way to dinner, I can help them, because I have this little tiny thing in my pocket and it solves the problem. If I'm asking somebody to get a site survey scan for me, it's really easy to send them a small package that includes a tiny essay just to get a scan to get me started.
What
when the
unmarketing
client
group
doesn't want to pay.
Unmarketing group says, "What's that sweet analyzer behind you?" I assume they're not talking about the Emmy Awards, but yes, the TTI.
That's
unit.
a TTI behind me. I always have a few different things with me at an event. The biggest problem that we have is making sure that we have an analyzer that goes high enough for everything that we need to do. For the most part, the highest we go is into the beginnings of 7 gig, doing cameras, in which case we've got to have an analyzer that at least goes to 7.5.
Right.
And that just depends on the event. I never want to count on whoever's bringing the RF equipment to bring an analyzer, because I don't know how it's set up. I don't know how it works. I don't know the last time it was calibrated. I'd rather just have my own tools when I'm doing that. As far as just getting everybody, kind of going back to the question,
Mm-hmm.
you could use Soundbase. You could use an Excel document if you wanted. It's just not going to do as well for you. It's not going to take into account Intermod or anything like that. I do not use an Excel document, but you can put your cameras in there. You can put your cameras. A lot of times when Henry and I are working on some of these really large ones, we'll do the low power stuff in IAS or in Soundbase, or and all of the camera stuff and all of the 450 stuff will be in spreadsheets. We have a lot of events that we work that way.
Because the math is more amenable to a spreadsheet for that higher frequency stuff, or
Yeah, well, we are dealing with math in 450, 455, but on cameras we're not. It's all digital. We're not dealing with intermods. We're really just working around. If we're working in 6.5 or 6.8 to 7.125, if we're working in those ranges, we're working with the local SBE possibly, and just working around stuff that's in that band, in that market, that we don't have to deal with. If we're dealing with stuff in the aft track bands 1.4 and 2.3, then we know what we have to steer around. If we're doing stuff in 2.2, our STA will tell us what we need to avoid, and then we have mostly Henry. I'm just a bouncing board. We have some really nice Excel stuff that we've put together for use for us to be able to do these super large events, to get all of these cameras in that need to be there. And there can be quite a few of those. We're not talking about events with 2 cameras.
right, multiple wireless cameras. So far we have a coordination program. I think we both like Soundbase fine enough.
We do.
And there's spectrum analyzers to see spectrum. One of the things that we talked about as a tool for troubleshooting is the ability to turn off a transmitter to see what the noise floor is, which is a kind of a funny idea, but I mean, it's really the only way to see what the spectrum is.
You can't figure out. We had at an event, I think 1.5, 2 years ago, someone from the broadcast side brought in a video return monitor that never got tuned out at the truck, and they turned it on, and then the house was calling me saying we're getting stepped on. Well, I can't figure out what's going on. Just by luck, they happened to be on the same frequency. The only difference is one was 6 meg and the other was 8 meg. So I kept watching this thing go from 8 meg to 6 meg and 8 meg to 6 meg. And it was as the house was turning their camera on and off, the 6 meg carrier was still there from the return video. So once we got that figured out, that it was 2 devices, if they had just kept their camera on, I never would have known that there was another device there.
Right. Because
they both would have just been there. We're not talking about something that was too close to it. They were on the same frequency.
I think that's, just speaking on a personal level, I think when I first got involved with radio mics, there was that sense that, oh, this is magic. And then you start to get into the physics of it, and you realize, no, wait, this is physics and math, right? The only way to see what the spectrum is like is for the absence of any carriers. If you're looking for what the existing noise floor is. Ike Zimbel is looking on LinkedIn, and we just sent him I'm just doing some housekeeping, sent him the YouTube link. Thank you, Jared, for taking care of Ike. Okay, I think there's also another aspect that we should talk about, just to sort of bring people up to speed from the last one before we get into new stuff, which is Soundbase and any of the databases are great, but give me a sense of what prep on site goes into, like for a big game that might involve a funny shaped ball. Like when do you start? Do you go on site? When do you start to prep for something like that?
I'm always collecting scans. So if I'm working a big event, I'm collecting a scan. If I'm lucky enough to have a game at a venue that's hosting a bigger game, in maybe the month before, just a lot of legwork, walking around, because the venues change. How you go into the building changes. How you leave the building changes. This walkway used to go this way. It doesn't go that way. And all those things matter when you're trying to get around to solve a problem. But I'm always collecting our own scans for our gear. And then I'm working with whomever else might be the coordinators as well. And this goes for all events that we start working with them. In a perfect world, I'd love to start doing that stuff 3 months in advance. But the reality is, we don't really know from the broadcaster's side what the plan is, and things change. So it gets really busy 3 weeks to a month out. My whole thing for any big event, and I don't care what the sport is, before the vendor packs their truck and closes the doors, I like them to have their frequencies. Because if I need them to replace gear and I don't tell them till they get there with their gear, it's really hard to replace the gear. It's a little different during a regular season sport where the gear travels for the whole season. Then we're dealing with our shop. Like if we have stuff that isn't really wideband, isn't 470 to 608, I might need to ship in a different IFB or a different microphone or something like that to solve the problem based on a city they're going to. But we are trying to make sure that all the gear is wideband to save clients on shipping costs for extra gear.
And just to be clear, it's because not all the gear is wideband that you need to know.
There's still gear out there that is still usable, that is good stuff, and it's just not wideband.
Right.
Wideband's definitely preferred by one and all, but the reality is there's still good stuff out there that isn't and needs to be used.
Right.
So we just have to have a plan in place when we go. Difficult cities in my book, Miami, Houston, Phoenix, an often overlooked city that isn't great. In Phoenix, there isn't one open TV channel. You're just dealing with the best of the worst. Nothing got left open when the FCC repacked everything. Between translators there and actual stations, there's nothing.
I want to get to that point in a second, putting a pin in that. The way these comments come to me, they sort of fall off if I don't get to them soon enough. So we're going slightly out of order, but this is a good question. What are the advantages, disadvantages of narrowband analog modulation FM wireless microphone transmitter signal compared to a high-quality linear digital carrier? So I think this is part technical, but also goes to coordination of both.
I think the biggest thing is the digital equipment on the higher end can get away with a smaller signal to noise ratio than you can in old school analog stuff. But we're still coordinating a lot for analog microphones. They're still out there and regularly used. So that is still sort of part of our planning. We're not saying, well, if you don't have a digital mic, you can't come.
And I think this answer loops nicely into the last thing that you said that I put a pin in, which is when you come to a city that has no empty DTV channels, how do you prioritize? What's your strategy for that?
I mean, the first thing that we deal with are the broadcasters and whomever is supplying the gear to try to use bands other than 470 to 608. Try to get them taken care of first. And then a lot of the ENG use is very close proximity. So if you have a low power DTV, then that's where they can go and they'll be fine. I was amazed at some of the first bigger events when ENG guys, I would clearly look at these as say, this is a terrible frequency, but it's the best I can do, and let them know, like, this is the best I can do. And they're fine. And they come back and thank you. It was great. It was perfect. Okay. Well, if you're only 5 feet away from your receiver, you can get away with a noisy environment and still be okay. And that's sort of what people have to realize. Because I don't give away a lot of backup frequencies at the big events. There just isn't enough. If I gave you 2 frequencies when you only needed 1, eventually I'm not giving some people anything.
Right.
And I'd rather just keep in my pocket some backup frequencies.
Right. And I think that's part of knowing where the frequency coordination table is, and conversely, you having a way to contact people, because I'd rather share this spectrum, this limited resource, and if I need a new frequency, then I'll ask for one,
Right.
as opposed to demanding backups or requesting backups for every primary. It's an interesting. So I appreciate that question about the differences between narrowband analog and digital, and your answer about that digital can tolerate a lower signal to noise ratio, because I think also the FM capture effect comes into play as well, right? So in that case where you gave a less than desirable channel, because they were closer, they were fine regardless of whether they were on digital or analog modulation.
Correct.
Some of the other tools in your arsenal, I imagine, are also, and I think it's important when people ask for a frequency, when and where are they using it, right? I don't expect that your frequency will be good everywhere in the venue. And if you're only going to be doing a live hit from 4 to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, that spectrum is free at other times, and this is all helpful communication, I would imagine.
I'm not a big fan of sharing frequencies amongst users who aren't familiar with each other. Because if that user doesn't pay attention, fires up too late, too early, but if I can connect them, just because you don't know each other now, if I can connect you, introduce you so you can work together, because ultimately the answer to this other person, the first guy is going to get frequencies. The second guy may or may not. But if I know that a ENG crew is going to come in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and one of the networks wants to do a morning show at 4 a.m., I will still want both parties to know that the other party is there.
I love that.
Because sometimes people say, well, we're just doing a live shot and we'll be there 4:30, we're gone by 6:30.
Right.
Or we're gone by 9 or whatever. Are you coming the day before? Are you going to set up everything? Are you going to test anything? Because that's a problem as well. That everything, the right questions have to be asked and the right people have to be introduced to each other.
I love that. Yeah.
Just the idea of sharing and telling people in a note, hey, I shared your frequency, that's not good enough. Not in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I need them to know that their frequencies are shared. And if you're the original user, I want your permission to share that. I want you to tell me we're not in until this time. There's no way that we could do this. We did a share at a big event, and the crew came in, the secondary user came in on their test day, and all of their mics lit up. The guy who was sharing the frequencies was off that day, but he left all his ears on when he left.
Of course.
So we just had to find those and turn them off, and it was not a big deal. It's still something that we joke about. But that was the test day. On the show day, everything was perfect.
Right.
And they were off the air in plenty of time.
And you left a note, I'm sure, on the guy's.
That's worthy of a text. Hey, by the way, you left all those on. You might want to turn them back on when you come in tomorrow morning. So very little can't be overcome, but people have to be realistic. We still get people that come in and say, we own this frequency. No, you don't.
Right.
You don't.
Right.
So, that might be what you regularly use in town. This isn't a regular event, and we will give you a frequency, but it's not going to be what you're used to having.
Right. No, I think that's an important distinction too, that the frequency coordinator does have the authority of the license holder, and at political events, political conventions, or in the case of NATO convention, that authority often has government enforcement possibility.
So we try to make sure everybody knows, and we will regularly work with security. I'm not going to fight with somebody who insists on using RF, even if they don't have a frequency or they won't change. But we work with security. Very seldom has it come in handy, but it's nice to have a plan in advance that, look, you can use that frequency anywhere you want, but when you don't have a credential to be here, you just can't use it here.
Right.
That's pretty simple.
I will say a walkie is a great prop. And the other lesson I learned, look, when I go out on these, I'm definitely like low person on the totem pole, and I appreciate all of the knowledge and all the people that I've been surrounded with and learned from them. But in extreme cases, and these are only extreme cases, nobody watching this would ever be part of this extreme case. Taking a picture of their credential has also come in handy. Just, the idea that, look, I'm not asking because I'm asking because I feel like asking. There's a real reason, and it has real consequences.
Yeah, and we've taken that in some of the sports leagues to their security people. Can we take a picture of their credential? That's the first thing they tell you. No one can take a picture of a credential, and I've never been turned down, because that's the only way I can identify this person if there's a problem, is I've got to have a picture of their credential. And we've never been turned down by security for that purpose.
Right.
Because it's all in an effort to make the event fun and usable for everyone. It's not just about the person who won't tune their gear or can't or won't follow the direction. We're just trying to make this so everybody has a good experience.
Yeah. And one of the most fun moments I had was at the NATO convention, literally putting countries of different broadcasters from different countries together, feeling like I was in the NATO spirit. Hey, Danish radio, you guys have an extra XLR cable. Can you loan it to the BBC? That kind of thing. So it's, magic is where I started, physics, electronics, and interpersonal. I think, it's interesting, the evolution of that tool set.
That's a big part of it, is just knowing. If you don't know all the people, it is really, really difficult to put the puzzle together. And that's because I came from the sports world as an A2. I know a lot of the people, and I know a lot of the A2s that are using the equipment. And that has been very, very helpful to get the work done, is to be able to connect the people together to make it work. Otherwise, you're just passing out numbers and you're hoping everybody's following along.
The other thing that I would say in terms of the last seminar that we had, the last live stream, bring an XLR cable as a backup. XLR cables do not need frequency coordination. They work great.
The problem that we're running into more and more is all these social media teams, and they can't do a hardwired microphone.
I'll push back on that. We may not have a link right now, but there's a, at NAB, when we do our live coverage, it is live, and we always bring a hardwired backup, even if we're shooting into an iPhone. There's a way. Zoom makes a really nice single channel USB-C preamp. Now, you can't just, if you haven't thought about it ahead of time and tested it, it's not going to work. But it's not that difficult to put together. All right. So, we got another question. Please keep them coming. For location sound people looking to invest in wireless gear, are there any devices that we should be wary of? Well, look, I think let's just stick to what is allowed at large event coordinations and what isn't allowed, and keep it objective. Are there any brands of wireless that just you say, sorry, we can't use it, and why?
There are a few things that we don't allow at the larger events. The larger events in the 1.9 spectrum, that is generally already full. Someone somewhere has already taken up every bit of the deck band for intercom. And because of that, the AVX mic is not something that we can bring in. I have at some games allowed AVX mics to work in locker rooms when I know that they're only going to go into the locker room post game.
Because
But
you're
by
taking...
then I'm done with intercom in 1.9, and chances are no one with the intercom is going into the locker room anyway. But again, you're really starting to trust people.
Right.
They can't turn it on early, and they can't say, oh, well, they did say that I could use it in the locker room. I'm sure it won't be a problem if I use it in the VOM out to where the event. No.
Right.
Like, and that'll only get me to change my mind if that ever happens. But every once in a while, I will allow it for that. And with that said, I was on a show at one point, and they asked me what kind of wireless to buy, and I did recommend that because they were going into bars and restaurants and getting hype for the game. And then it just worked in every city. Everywhere we went, it just worked. And they were just going to be in a bar or a restaurant. They were never going to be at the game. So all these devices have their place. It just may not be for game time because that spectrum might be used for something else.
Right. And the other one that I've been told about is Deity, in terms of, the original wireless just had too wide of a spectral mask and had other issues that just stepped on, it just took up too much spectrum. Is that fair to say?
That was our experience, is when we put that on an analyzer and got feedback from other coordinators that I work with and worked with other techs, that the mask of the carrier was just way bigger than any other microphone. And we just didn't, for the most part, we don't get requests for them at the events, but if they do come in, we don't have people using them.
Yeah, no, and they have a new system that I think is worth looking into, to investigate whether it still has those issues, their IFB system, but yeah, time will tell with that. I will tell one quick thing at NATO. This poor crew, they took the first mic they took out was the AVX, and I said, I'm really sorry, we can't permit that here. And then they said, oh, it's okay, I have a backup, which of course was a Deity. It's like, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I promise.
And it does happen, and it just depends. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of, and I had a lot of news photogs say that they carry these, are the DJI and sorry,
no,
all those brands. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
They come in a little box, and there's one receiver and two transmitters, and they're rechargeable. And we do check those in. We don't coordinate them. It's a use at your own risk device. When we talked pre the show, we discussed. So I did the World Baseball Classic a month ago, and the stuff that we got from World Baseball Classic, all of this stuff came in. We don't know how many you can use in an environment at the same time, and we're still not really sure. Eventually, you will eat up all the spectrum. There's no doubt about it. It's a frequency hopping device, and eventually you'll just fill that bit of 2.4 with too many of these. I don't know what too many is yet. I haven't played with it enough, but we did start to get complaints at that event when they were all lined up against the first base line and the third base line. They were starting to get little hiccups with their microphones because there were just too many of them using, and we probably had 100 of those microphones at that event.
Wow.
All the social media teams are plugging those into their cell phones and everything they're doing. But I did hear from some ENG photogs that they carry those as the backup to the backup, just in case. It's always something that they could have if they needed it.
I think the amazing thing about those microphones is how well they work most of the time. And we can argue about sound quality and all of that, but in terms of voice and what is needed for news gathering, it's remarkable technology. Yeah, and the battery life is pretty good. All right, I'm going to try an experiment. This will probably get edited out, but it sounds like a compressor has kicked in, or like an air. Did air conditioning kick in your space? Let's do an experiment. Everybody, everybody, bear with me. In Zoom, in your Zoom client, there should be something that says "Original Sound for Musicians" on or off. It's on the upper right.
I can probably do something faster and better.
Oh, okay. All right. And by the way, I've had sirens and toilet flushes in my space, so I don't know how much of that is making it. In the meantime,
all right, that'll go off in a minute.
Oh, awesome! Thank you. In the meantime, and there's a on cue New York City siren. I don't know if that's making its way through Zoom. In the meantime, let's move. I feel like we did a good job kind of summarizing part one. I want to sort of talk about stuff that you've experienced in the last few years, specifically with new spectrum. And it may not be exactly new spectrum, but I think a few years ago it was more theoretical, and now we're starting to really see regular use of the technology. Which is at the AF-Track band, I think is one thing that you must have seen more and more of in the last few years.
Well, being that we also do a lot of RF cameras, we've been using the AF-Track band for as long as I've been doing this. But now we're seeing, and we always saw at large events, microphones in there. Now there is more readily available equipment in the AF-Track band, and we're going to see more and more of it. And it is opening another place to go. It's generally quieter there. At the big events, it's full. If we don't plan for microphones ahead of time, it'll all be cameras. But we try to leave some space for microphones and have done that for years.
And for those that may not be familiar with AF-Track, tell us. Oh, it just went away. Wow.
I know.
For those not familiar with AF-Track, tell us what are we talking about? Why does it have that funny name, and what spectrum is it?
So it's military spectrum that gets coordinated by AF-Track. So you have to go to them. You have to get the coordination. You pay by the megahertz when you go there. That's a Henry question as to how much that is, because off the top of my head, I don't know. If he's listening, he can type it into the comments. Once you get that, you need to take that full reply email and send it in with your STA in order to get the coordination allowable use of that band. So you can't do one without the other. You can't you can't get your STA without AF-Track, and you can't use it just with AF-Track.
And there's talk eventually of there being a kind of standards database along the, like I remember similar talk about white space devices, where it'll be more automated and slightly more open, but there's still some restrictions. Like with the STA, you have to specify when and where. Is that right?
You do have to specify when and where. You need your start time, your stop time. You have to have a stop buzzer person who, if there is an issue, you call that person and they will turn off whatever's being used in that band. And when you get the AF-Track back, you get the whole email of all the different groups that it went out to, that AF-Track went to get their permission to use that spectrum.
And this is up in 1.4, is that?
It is, I think it's 1435 to 1525.
And so
you're asking me a lot of Henry questions here, but I got them.
No, this is great. Okay, but and thank you to somebody in our team put in the AF-Track organization coordination link for people that want to learn more about that. So okay, so it's regulated spectrum, more tightly regulated than certainly 470 to 608 is now, and there's equipment now, including, by the way, Sound Devices Nexus, which I just see somebody jumped into the comments about, that is capable of transmitting there, and you've seen. I didn't know that it was used already for wireless video, but certainly wireless on the wireless audio side, I imagine you've seen more and more use of it. And how has that been going?
I mean, in my experience, I know of at least one event that I have been at that has had it, and it was fine. It was great. Worked worked like it was supposed to. Um, Gave me another place to put. I think it was 6 microphones, and it's options that are out there. We need we're going to these large events and we're running out of room, especially if the large events happens to be in a market that just doesn't have a lot of open DTV.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to start thinking out of the box.
And I want to give a shout out to WIMSA and the efforts of WIMSA and Henry Cohen and Prakash, because they've made huge inroads into the ability with a lot of restrictions, and it's definitely it's beyond just applying for an STA, but TV 37, the radio astronomy channel, is starting. I've heard is starting to be opened up to at least one large event.
So, yeah, I know of one event where we were able to STA it. It's still very tricky. It's not available in every city. Um, it You have to do your homework. There's a lot of work that goes involved. It's not going to be something that's available because I want to use it. It's going to have to be more on a we need it. We've run out of room everywhere else
Right.
kind of situation, and then it's going to matter what market you're in if you're going to be able to do it. I don't think that's something that you're going to see available for ENG guys on a regular basis to use legally.
Right. Right. This is definitely more for large coordinated events where every other bit of spectrum has been in use, and even then, I understand from WIMSA. Shout out to them, by the way. Everybody watching this, if they're not already a member, should consider being a member. That it's still very dependent on whether you're going to cause any noise to radio astronomy telescopes, which are incredibly sensitive. So. I remember seeing a map that there's going to be areas that will forever be off limits.
Correct.
So I made a bunch of notes while we were talking before we went on air, and I wanted to get into how much of the ISM bands are you starting to coordinate? And if you can, I imagine you've always coordinated them, but has that been increasing of late? And give us a sense of some of the strategies that you use to coordinate those ISM bands. Meaning, ISM is the 2.4 gig Wi-Fi band and other uses, and 5 and 6 gig, and now it's even going in a little bit into 7 gig. Is that considered ISM?
So when you start talking about 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi, that is from 5925 up to 7125.
Mm-hmm.
So we're spending a lot of time. A lot of venues are installing 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi for the fan engagement, fan experience, and we're spending time with them. We're educating them. Henry has spent a lot of time trying to help educate manufacturers and the installers because they're going to these places. I had an event and the CTO said, well, we just spent however many millions on installing the system. Now you're telling me I can't use half of it.
I'm going to be one of those CTO types and say, what do you mean educate? It just works. I just turn it on.
And that's what we get a lot of that. But then we educate as how this gets shared, and that, the BAS spectrum is in the middle of all this. Uni 6 and Uni 8 are all BAS spectrum, and we need that spectrum for these large events for cameras. Um, and keeping in mind, all those cameras are also carrying microphones on them, and those cameras are getting into the action. You may not have a traditional handheld microphone, but the minute you put a shotgun microphone on that camera, we're passing audio down that 6 gig frequency,
Right.
and we need that spectrum. So there's a lot of negotiations with people on in the 6 gigahertz land, and in the 5.9, that 5.9 up through 6 gig. Um, More and more, we're getting people that are using different devices in 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi,
Hmm.
and so we're having to work with the IT teams to see about turning off certain channels or finding out channels they may not be using already. Um, but all these things take time, and they take more time than traditional. I need a microphone frequency. Okay, here you go.
Henry jumped in. Thank you, Henry. ISM is also 902 to 928, as well as the others, and 6.5 and 7 gigahertz is BAS.
Yep.
Um,
So 902 to 928, we do
is-
a lot of intercom systems in there,
yep.
and we're regularly spending time on the counts. How many systems? How many packs? The same with the deck band. How many packs? How many different systems? How are we going to get this to work?
It's
And we'll deal with the manufacturers as well and get their help.
it's interesting. No, I mean I think comparing 902 to say 1.9 is interesting, right? Because I think 902 there could be 902 to 928 there could be any number of different devices, like doing any number of different things. I've seen baby monitors, and I've seen a wireless DMX and intercom systems, and we just started fooling around with Wi-Fi Halo is in there. And also, as we touched on the last one, I think there could be, e-commerce, not e-commerce, but telemetry, sort of product detection, RFID.
There's a lot of RFID
Yes.
popping up in 902 to 928. A lot of self checkout at these sporting venues.
Right.
They're putting in so your RFID for your shirt that you're buying, and you go and you stand over here on a mat, and it figures out everything, and then you pay, and you walk out, and there's never a person. You're never dealing with a human. You do it all, but that's all 902 to 928. And a lot of that stuff can be at higher powers than our stuff can be.
Right.
They can be at 1 watt per checkout. And if there's 4 checkouts, that's 4 watts.
Right.
That's a lot. You can literally see that all over a stadium or an arena, depending on where they are in the concourse.
Sure. Yeah, if they're right at the edge of the field where the checkout kiosks are, I imagine that radius.
All of a sudden, that's just starting to bounce all over every wall that's reflective, that's in the building, and it's going all over the place.
And similarly, although I've seen all the stuff I've seen in 1.9 gig tends to be audio related, and I'm not sure if that's by legal statute or not, but it's decked, so it's that wireless phones, but then there's also intercoms, and AVX, Sennheiser's system, is also in there. And when we talk about wireless comms, it used to be Riedel and Clearcom. Fireworks control, right? I guess in 902 to 928.
902 to 928,
Yep.
There's a lot of
Fireworks control.
most of the fireworks control, or the any of that fireworks stuff is in 902 to 928.
But up and decked, now we're talking about Hollyland and Ceramonic, and there's a whole bunch of new players that are also using that spectrum. What is your approach for this sort of like this very, very public spectrum that anybody can go out and buy a device and use it in?
It still has to be coordinated, so you have to work with the users and try to figure out the best way to do it. In a perfect world, everybody would be clocked properly. We don't live in that perfect world, So I know one of the college conferences is trying to make sure anyone that uses 1.9 is using GPS clocking. Um,
Oh,
and
what does that do for them?
so you're using GPS for your clock. So everybody's at least clocked the same,
Uh-huh.
which will allow the hopping patterns to stay the same so they won't eventually hop on top of each other. It's working for the most part, but pack counts matter.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to get into multiple systems, I've not seen anything successful with multiple systems that are not clocked getting over the 50 time slots.
Right.
So you spend a lot of time figuring out how many packs, when they're going to be used, can any be shut off at different times. If you have, there are, Riedel makes a package that can be used for football coaches. So can we pregame have a bunch of in-house fan experience type things going on that then during the game maybe they have less, and then when you bring in the coaches then we're good. It's a lot of playing with the number of packs that are going to be used.
Uh-huh. And those systems, and well, I'm thinking of the ones from Hollyland in particular, don't have a way to sync to an external clock at all.
I got to be honest, I don't know anything about the Hollyland system to be able to answer that question.
They've they've really taken over the film world in an interesting way. Look, because of the price point, and they work. Um, and I think the very latest base station obviously has huge amounts of I/O in it. It's got Dante and stuff like that. But the ones that I see the most of have very basic 4-wire and 2-wire I/O and no ability to externally clock. So that the system is the system.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, there's one headset is the master, and that's how that
I've
works.
seen those at a lot of events, and those are we don't generally at large events allow those because again, not because they can't be used, but we've already committed
Yep.
to filling that spectrum with other users.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. So, certainly delineating who the primary users are, who the rights holder, sort of prioritizing who the rights holders are, and then what happens without sort of naming names, like when a big stadium has installed a Wi-Fi system, how do you kind of work with them to make room for some of the wireless cameras and other uses?
I mean, that's just working with the IT teams and possibly, their director of IT working with the vendor that did the install and trying to figure out the best processes, trying to work with leagues to set up a an operating procedure that this is how we always do it, or on game days, this is how we do it. Um, I'm getting my own share of knowledge just from these companies that do this around the country. Is those systems learn how things are working, and so they don't want to make last minute changes. They want to know what it's going to be for every day so the system works correctly for their purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for us, we want channels turned off so we have frequencies, and when they're off, they're off. We're good.
And to be clear, their purpose is often about fan engagement. And
It's almost always fan engagement, and
right.
they want to know that their system is going to work properly. So they want to make the changes as soon as possible, and a lot of these systems take a while for the change to propagate and for the system to propagate any further changes that it needs to do to itself to make sure that the coverage of all their areas is what is expected. It's a time consuming process from what I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I shared a story as we were sort of getting ready on the film side of stuff. where we're dealing with a lot of wireless follow focus and a lot of use of 2.4 gig, show link, et cetera, et cetera. I've asked the IT department from the studios if they can turn off 2.4 gig in their access points. And their pushback has always been about, well, what about legacy devices? At the stadium level, are you noticing a similar pushback, or what's their attitude about 2.4?
Some stadiums have turned it off. They'll say completely, but it's the fan-facing stuff that's been turned off in 2.4. They still might be using it for a point-of-sale system. There was, at one event that I did, there was a system that was using the access points to allow you from your phone to find things within the stadium. So it was using that. So I didn't fully understand how they were doing what they were doing, but you would never, it was just using it for GPS location. They were using the 2.4 side of things. Again, I didn't have a lot going on in there, so I saw the information and I should have followed up more, but I did not. But so that's potentially something.
Where it's triangulating the 2.4 from different access points and figuring out
So
where
if you're
you
sitting
are.
in your seat, it'll help you find the closest men's room.
Or let you
Or hot
order
dog,
food.
or pizza.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Yeah.
We had one, it's still in the ISM bands in 902 to 928. There's a system in place now that will monitor the supplies in a bathroom, the amount of toilet paper that's left and when it needs to be refilled, the soap, the paper towel, all of that stuff, and it's all 902 to 928. And then it was going back to the access points 902 to 928. The access points were sending out cellular to the cloud. The cloud was taking all that data and then shooting it back to the tablets of the personnel that would restock the bathrooms. And so it's more noise.
Yeah, and that the regs in that band, I think, like we were saying, allow for 1 watt for those kind of IoT devices. If and if you're not a good RF neighbor, you just think more is better, which is not, right?
I mean, the good thing is all bathrooms are back of house.
Yes.
So the only thing that you can hope for is from the center of the bowl, where you're going to have your intercom systems. You're not going to see that noise.
Right.
But potentially, if you did a studio show next to a bathroom, it could be a problem.
Sure. Yeah. All right. The other technology I'd love to talk about, and that I imagine you've started to see a couple of systems, is WMAS systems, and I think it's an interesting technology. I wonder, how have you seen it deployed, if at all, and if there's any issues around either channel density or how that spectrum can be shared.
I mean, I think the biggest thing that you run into with any of the WiMAS, when I go into a building, I'm kind of locked in with the house frequencies as is. We don't make it a habit of moving the house around because they're comfortable where they are. As the WiMAS systems come in more and more, we're probably going to have to move the house around. We won't be able to say, okay, you're where you always are, because I may need that space in order to get whatever larger carrier that I need, depending on the manufacturer. That's the only issue with that. Getting into, like, if using as an example the ADTQ, that you need 800 kilohertz. My concern when I go to another frequency coordinator who maybe has never seen the system before, my concern is, does that individual know that this is 800 kilohertz, and do they know how to coordinate around that 800 kilohertz?
I'm going to ask you. I don't know. Like, what is there anything? What would you tell that person?
I mean, you have to really get into a bit of an education on how the WiMAS is and how much spectrum they need around that carrier. Otherwise, if they if they were just doing an Excel sheet and doing it every 400 kilohertz, I'd be stepping on somebody on either side of it.
So how much room would you give it? If it's 400, if the center channel has 400 kilohertz on either side, how much additional room would?
Well, with the ADTQ, you're at 800 kilohertz, and that should give you enough space around it. I know a lot of coordinators that just put it in the center of a meg, and they give it out. They deal with it that way.
Right.
A lot of this stuff, as you get into the sound devices equipment, all these different things, there's a bit of an education for us as coordinators working with other coordinators to try to figure out how they want to do that. I can't tell somebody I'm sending a sound devices Astral, give me some frequencies. I have to start narrowing down where I plan to use the device in the band, and then please coordinate me in that band, because otherwise I may not be able to use all the frequencies they give me. Because I won't get into one of the tuning bands that
exactly
I can be split between several tuning bands. So as a requester, which I am as well, I have to figure out how I'm going to use that gear and where I want to use that gear in the spectrum, and then request it accordingly. The same as if you're going to do any WiMAX devices. What is it that you want? How are you going to use it?
And I think this is one of the ironies of the age of wideband equipment is we still should be thinking in terms of narrowing it down to what we really need.
Correct.
One thing I would say about the WiMAX stuff too is, are people using it to the maximum density? Like, is it a
I have to go backwards. I've been corrected by Henry, because apparently he thinks that I said that the Astro was WiMAX.
WiMAX.
It is not.
Right.
It is just a wide band
Tuning,
receiver
yes.
that can tune to wide. But I still have the same problems when I'm requesting it.
Right.
Is how I'm going to request. I have to be more specific. If I'm asking for Spectera, I have to make sure that the venue can give me 6 megahertz. Or the coordinator for that event. If it's not me, I have to make sure that there is 6 meg available, that they can put that in there. Someone might be able to give me 18 frequencies, but they may not be able to give me 6 consecutive meg,
right.
which has to line up with a TV channel. So they may not be able to do that for me.
Right. And as a requester, I want to make sure I'm using that. I'm making good use of all that spectrum. I think I have a real need for it. As rental houses, I wonder too if that's the kind of thing where you could put all of the IFBs on one Spectera system, for example. And just slot them out and offer it as a solution.
There's definitely something to be said for that as a plan, as part of your coordination plan, is that if all the mics and all the IFBs are coming from one vendor, can they set up something where everybody's you're just getting your handheld microphone?
Yeah.
The A2 comes over, I'm with such and such, and I need my 6 microphones.
Right. Here's your Dante
Here's
patch.
Your 6.
Yeah.
And you're just, exactly. You're just doing a Dante to that location, and they get their 6 microphones and off they go.
Yeah. Interesting times. All right. Well, please keep your questions and comments coming. I think in general, we've exhausted the list of stuff that I've made notes about. I think one of the things that we have kind of come across is license-free does not mean coordination-free, that it still does need
100%.
to be coordinated. But
that is something we run into all the time, is I'm bringing in this device and I didn't need to coordinate it because they told me, because unfortunately there's a lot of manufacturers that say you don't have to coordinate license-free stuff. You still have to coordinate it.
Right.
If we're using that space, you can have too much in that space. Therefore, that's why we coordinate it. When I originally started seeing Bolero out there, people would say, well, I don't coordinate in that band. Well, it's a different kind of coordination. I'm not giving you a frequency, but we are keeping track of belt packs.
Right.
Somebody has to.
Right. Right. Jason Glass, speaking of making best use of spectrum, do you ever ask Spectera users which modes they are operating in? For example, the user can choose modes that only accommodate 4 stereo channels that occupy the full 6 meg of spectrum. Yeah, I think that's part of like.
I have not had a lot of requests to use Spectera. I think I've had it at 2 events now, and it was all in use with where I was working very closely at the event with that particular RF tech. So we will try to figure that out. I think the question is more about spectrum efficiency. If it's just a couple of mics in the 6 meg, feel free to type something, Jason, that says that I'm answering your question or I'm not. That when we've come up with space to put the Spectera, it's with the understanding that we have the space to put it there.
Right.
And so therefore we're not wasting it because it's being used.
Either they're using
potentially space we weren't going to use otherwise.
Absolutely, and if they are choosing that 4 stereo channel mode, it's either because they need the fidelity or the low latency or whatever it is, but that it's been thought about. I think is the big thing.
Right.
It's been considered. Ike, I think you're referencing the Shure WMAS system, maybe, but I don't know. But in any case, the idea that the thing that these WMAS systems have in common is that they go beyond the typical spectral use of spectrum that we're used to. And so it's more spectrum, and is it being used as efficiently as possible? With Ike, with ADPSM, I've been asking people which mode they are using.
I am regularly asking people with ADTQ, ADPSM, like what are you doing? What's your plan? Because it's important. If their plan was to use it in wideband digital and I'm coordinating it as an analog, it's a problem.
Yes, that's right. And sometimes they answer correctly, Ike said. Well, good.
That is very true.
Yeah.
It's very true. And look, it's a lot of, I like the bigger events where we have more coordinators because I like the coordinators to go visit the techs.
Yeah.
A lot of the events we do have a lot of different techs. It's not just one front of house guy and that's it. Mm-hmm. Our events tend to have, and Ike's very familiar with this, you've got, 3 or 4 different broadcasters, and each one has its own tech, and each broadcaster has a studio show, which has another tech. And so you really need to go visit them and make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, and I have to just say, shout out to your column, and I don't remember exactly where I read them, but they're really good. I'm sure they're off your LinkedIn page, and I encourage everybody to read the stuff that Ike's written. It's super helpful, even if I'm not regularly in the music world, but the thought processes that Ike outlines is really great. So please, everybody should check out that stuff. Jason, yes, Loren, it makes us have to go a step further to assure spectral efficiency. Have to ask about their mode selections. I think that's right. That's yeah. I mean, are they using this spectrum as efficiently as possible? I think that's right.
I mean, that is a very big thing that you can come in and use it poorly. I've been lucky at the couple events where I've dealt with these it was used to the best of our ability, but it was spectrum we weren't planning to use otherwise.
Yes.
And so that's helpful as well, because if you want to use some kind of WMAS with only 4 microphones, it's not spectrumly efficient. But if I wasn't going to use that spectrum where I could put them with any other piece of gear, then it's spectrumly efficient. I just added 4 more microphones.
Totally. Yep. And yes, shout out to Ike and our team for putting his ProSound web. That's where you find it, which is cool. Well, good. I think we're getting ready to wrap this up. Is there anything?
I'm surprised Henry hasn't had more questions. Come on, Henry.
More. I think more answers is more like it. But yes, shout out to Henry. Thank you very much for everything that you do. And we were talking. You are Director of Frequency Coordination. Henry Cohen is Director of Spectrum Affairs for CP Communication and has been an incredibly vocal proponent of wireless spectrum use for not just wireless microphones, but any wireless use in entertainment. And I have learned a lot from just hanging around him.
Our team at CP, we've spent a lot of time cultivating our knowledge and working together. Henry's a huge portion of our information, which is super helpful, and it trickles down to just the guys in the field that regularly rely on us when the gear shows up, just to know how to use it appropriately and to know to participate in the frequency coordination and realize the importance of actually tuning to the correct frequencies when you get them. If you have the piece of paper from the coordinator, the email or whatever, tuning to that correct frequency is super important. And we've spent a lot of time educating a lot of audio guys in my world to make sure that they follow the coordination so they have a good show.
That's right.
They should be able to not have to worry about the frequencies that they're on.
It benefits all of us, and it is a shared resource. All right, Henry did have the most important question of the day, which is what's for lunch?
He's on his own. He's on his own.
All right.
He should have eaten by now. It's 3:00. What are you waiting for?
Thank you, Loren, for watching.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Loren, for being a part of this. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will have this up on our GothamSound.tv website, and if you have ideas for future talks about coordination or anything RF related, info@GothamSound.tv. And thank you for watching. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Nate. See you real soon.